channel. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. So good to have you here, everybody, this Sunday at Mike's. Every Sunday, 11 p.m. Central European Time, we do this show, and we are glad to be able to do it again this evening. How is everybody out there? While we wait for more people to show up in the live stream, I will start out as I always do, always will, by first thanking the audience for taking the time to tune in. This live stream wouldn't be anything without you. And please keep in mind that this is not a rant, this is a conversation. So feel free to join in the chat while we do this live stream. Whether you watch this live or in the rerun, always don't forget to hit the like and get some comments down in the comments section. I will always reply, and I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much. Yeah, guys, how's everybody doing? Scott, how you doing, sir? Scott says, I'm going to be devil's advocate and argue that modeling is not dying off, but going on. Yeah, well, we're going to see. We're talking about that. Hold that thought. Mr. Watson in the house. Hey, how you guys doing? Good to see you. Everybody here showing up as always. Such a blessing to have such a great crew. Everybody showing up all the time supporting this channel. Really, really greatly appreciated. All right, so we're waiting for more people to show up. What's been going on here upstairs to the right channel? You know, not a lot. And sometimes that's actually a good thing. But I saw a movie this weekend. Wait a minute, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. Here we go. I saw the Naked Gun movie this weekend. I know there's a little controversy whether or not some people think it's good as the original. I'm old enough to go back to when it was on TV called Police Squad, but that's another time. It's back in the early 80s. But I laughed. I have to tell you guys, if you're going to see a movie, you want just a stupid laugh, that's one worth paying money to see. There's a scene with a snowman that I haven't laughed that loud in a long time. It was really, really, really a funny, funny, funny movie, at least to me. And it was mostly in the spirit of the original movie, so there's that. What else is going on here? Yeah, not a lot, guys. Like I said, in between shipments, I haven't started my guitar safari quite yet. And Fern's on holiday, so it's going to be a couple of weeks before we even see the completely finished, refinished Squire that I was working on from him when he tightens it up. But that's okay. It's kind of like the summer doldrums anyway. August is always a quiet time in Europe, actually, no matter where you're at. So it's going to be one of those kind of months. We'll see how it goes. Let's see here. So tonight, we're going to talk about modding. It's a topic that I thought might be very interesting to get into. And I want to talk about the history of modding, which is something that I did a little research today in preparation to make my notes here for this live stream. And, in kind of my own experience as well. As you know, I've been in the music industry since, let's say professionally, since 1984. So a long time. And I've seen all the trends. I've seen things with being a multi instrumentalist. Of course, I've kept up with everything, not just keyboards, not just guitars, not just amplifiers, but just about everything over the years, decades really. And I think that the golden age. I'd like to hear from you in the chat what you think. But I've come to the conclusion that the golden age for DIY modding on guitars, basses too, but let's just keep it to guitars, was between 2005 to roughly around 2015. Now, I know a lot of you are going to say, well, wait a minute, there was a huge amount of DIY stuff that was going on, of course, from 2015 until now, especially with the disease that shall not be named in between, and all the new people who got into guitar, and all the people who had time to finally get to those projects. And I would agree with that, but that would actually be a sort of a tapering off there, and I'll explain why tonight. One of the things that I have found that during this time, from 2005 to 2015, you could get cheap Squires. See, I'm going to go from the economics, I guess. I'll spoil the lead here and say I'm looking at this, really looking at it from economics, a cost to do point of view. And during that period of time, cheap Squires, Harley Bentons, and 80s made in Japan guitars were everywhere, and they were quite inexpensive. Um, at that time, you could grab a nice body, not a Temu body, but a nice body for $50, a neck for around 75 bucks, say, and a set of pickups for $40 and build something personal. So you're looking at your all-in plus the parts of under 150 bucks. During that time period, you could do that. You could achieve that. Some of the best parts casters that I've seen, honestly, were in that from that time period. Guys who did during that time because they were able to access, great parts for inexpensive prices. Um, if you haven't checked out the prices of necks these days, be prepared to be surprised because it's not 75 bucks anymore. Trust me. So there's that. Ben Allmark's in the house. How you doing, Ben? Welcome, sir. Good to have you here. Scott says, has the reasons for modding guitars changed over the decades, the 70s, for example? Cheers to you too, Daniel. Welcome to the chat. Cheers to you, sir. As a matter of fact, I'll lift my mug to that. um, well, I think, Scott, that we've seen that the genesis, for lack of a better word, of the boutique anything, be it pickups or amps. Or pickups, of course, with Seymour Duncan and DiMarzio, guys like that. Amps with Dumbles, for example, in the 70s, 80s period. This was the time that was kind of a genesis for that. It wasn't really as widespread as it became as it did in 2005. And one of the reasons behind that was, of course, for Americans with NAFTA and the things that came from that, parts became cheaper. So it got to the point where the proliferation of people doing windings, doing for pickups, creating amps, doing things like that, really got started. Again, I think that's why I highlight that period. So the internet was beginning. It was just it's just really getting started too, especially if you were in that first wave from the late 2000 or 2010s when you were in that first wave of YouTubers, and that's when you really started seeing a buildup of the hey, look at this, and this is how you do that, and a lot of guys said, oh, okay, let me do that. Um, you weren't just chasing tone; you were really chasing identity too, and you know. I think that any good modding project really starts, and I meant to have it here as a prop, but I completely forgot it as my mod project guitar. I think the start of any kind of modding project is really tailoring something that fits your needs. And you really won't learn that till after trying a few guitars and going through it. And that's subjective, of course, because that's different from person to person. But generally, that's kind of the feeling that I had. That golden era was during that time, and those were the reasons, and that was kind of what you were aiming for. You weren't chasing just tone; you were chasing identity. If, for example, with Eddie Van Halen creating his Frankenstrat, and not only was he just chasing not only was just chasing the tone of that guitar that he wanted, but also striking identity for himself with it, something that stood out, you know, something that was show business, I guess you could say. Mike Watson, Zappa had a crazy amount of mods on a lot of his guitars. Yeah, you had a lot of early '70s guys, and then going into '80s and up into his death. You know, you saw that evolution with his guitars. I agree. And again, just like DiMarzio and the other people that I mentioned were on the forefront of modding, there was of course guitarists who were spawning that kind of desire too. My dog Hoshi here is with me. She's here right now at my feet. She came in and sat down, and I didn't want to kick her out because tomorrow is her 13th birthday. My Shiba Hoshi is 13. Unbelievable. And so happy for that. She's doing well. She went to the park today. I'm going to stand up and let her out because I don't want she's getting, I don't want my toes get licked by my dog while I'm doing my live stream. Go on, Hershey. You guys will excuse the interruption, but she's a sweetheart. I'm so happy for her. Yeah. We'll all give our birthday wishes to Miss Hoshi. She's doing good. At 13 years old today, I have a puppy too, as you know. Well, not puppy more. 1 year is after. It's been about a year and a few months, but they were keeping up with each other. Hoshi's pretty spry. The only thing with her is her eyes. But then again, I could say the same thing about myself. You know, fast forward today, and Harley Benton sells Relic Telecaster with all the modded features for under $250. And I'm going to start there at something like that, a price point like that, because remember I said that there was a time when you could do a mod guitar, you know, from scratch for around 150 bucks. And for a guy like Eddie Van Halen, by the way, the Van Halens were not wealthy at all. And it cost, you know, every dime that he had to scratch together to build that guitar was, you know, was put into it. And during that golden age of modding, like I said, before the prices of just everything shot up, you could get into one of your own, a build of your own, you know, for under 150, if you wanted to get fancy, 200 bucks, you know. And now you got Benton making modded tellies for 250. Why, you know, why bother? And then again, of course, like I said, the cost of the neck alone now at all parts, for example, will cost you anywhere upwards of $200, $300 to $400, depending upon the one that you buy. And that's far more than cost of the Harley Benton, obviously, just for the neck. You see, the economics for modding is what I think is where I'm going tonight with this. You know, the economics don't make sense much anymore for modding. It seems like back in the day, Scott says, the mentality was, if you don't like it, change it. Cutting bodies to be more comfortable or playable. 80s seem more identify, less cutting and more graphics. No, I think some of the worst cutting occurred during the 80s. There were Japanese guitars. Even Japanese guys were doing it. That's how you know it was bad. Because those guys are usually really try to keep them nice, but really bad routing done, you know, really bad routing, like they did it with a butter knife and a bottle of tequila. And there's a lot of them out there. You know, you don't want. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? I'm not even gonna unscrew that plate. Everything's working. I don't want to know what's underneath there. I had one guitar I bought once, a Greco Les Paul, that they had routed it so bad it was almost Fern thought it was going to collapse. He thought that the plate cover was and the bridge and all that and the pickups were all going to collapse in. And so no, it's been my experience that the worst period of time, you know, was the '80s. But that's just anecdotal. Today's modding seems to be all about cost savings and tone chasing, in my opinion. Um, Joxon says, "What are you doing?" Well, I'm kind of sitting here giving a live stream right now. What are you doing, sir? Uh, Anime Bro said, "Hi, well, welcome to you, Anime Bro. Welcome. Good to have you here. Good to have you here." Yeah, so there's that. Just again, you guys can pipe in. These have been my experiences. Finner's Mod Shop offers really nearly endless combinations out of the box. Even AliExpress offers age tuners, custom plates, and preloaded guards. Um, if you can buy it pre-modded, then what's left to mod? Is kind of the thing. Because one of the reasons, is again the identity thing that we were talking about there has kind of gone out the window, and now it's a different thing, as Scott was pointing to, as I'm alluding to. It's become a different thing altogether, and that thing, is not really in the spirit of what modding was, when it started out. So there's that. So has guitar modding lost its soul to mass production? See, again, I get back to NAFTA and all that, and everybody could open up their own boutique winding this or boutique amp this or boutique pedal that because the parts became cheaper, more accessible. Uh, it became kind of a mass production thing. I tell you, a set of original Duncans from first couple of years, DiMarzio's as well, especially quite any DiMarzio, to be honest with you, are quite a find, and they are great sounding pickups. Fast forward today to tone writers and other mass production companies that are doing their own thing, but still they all are starting to sound a little soulless compared to the originals. In my opinion, I've heard enough pickups, as you know, so I could testify on that. And that's just my opinion. So, has guitar modding lost its soul to mass production? Is a question I'd like to throw out there to you guys tonight. Mike, how you doing? Zappa like to put a Sustainiac on his guitars. Yeah, a lot of things. You know, Zappa was a genius. We've been discussing Zappa in our reading of Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon that we're going to get into a little bit here tonight later, Mike. But it was guys like him, of course, the guy from Boston, hell, he created a whole industry from doing guitar mods and things like that. I mean, he bought anyway, it takes those kind of guys, and there was a proliferation of those guys during the 70s and the early 80s. There's a lot of smart guys, and they really were the ones who got the ball rolling for us lesser minds. Cheers to the crew. Yeah, cheers to the crew. Welcome, you guys. Thank you, everybody, showing up here. Everybody's here now. It's so good to have you folks here. Let me stop for a moment, take a breath, and say that. Thank you so much for everybody showing up tonight. Good to be here. I'm watching from Korea. I support you. Whoa, Kansamida, thank you so much. Welcome to you. Cheers, cheers, cheers to you out there in Korea. I hope it's not too hot. I know it's hot. I've been keeping my eye on my friends in Japan, and I know if it's hot in Japan, it's super hot in Korea. My nephew Alex is in the house. How you doing, Mr. McWilliams? Good to have you here. Any Ted Green fans in here? I'm sure there are. Joe's Garage is my favorite Zappa record. Yeah, um, I, I, I don't know enough Zappa to really comment on that. I'm familiar with individual pieces, but a record, I'll listen to that though. I will check that out because I like checking stuff out, especially if it's good music. And I know Zappa, as eccentric as he was, he does not disappoint. Joe's Garage. Scott says pre-sale mods are soulless. Yeah, I mean now you can just lift out the play. You know they've got solderless, boutique pickups that you can put in your Les Pauls now, where you don't have to solder anything. You just quick connect, and you're good to go. Um, does it make a difference in the sound? No. Does it take something away from the spirit of the instrument? Yeah, a little bit. I never liked the quick connect system. I always thought that that was taking a little. It was just a little adding a little extra bit of plastic that I just didn't see necessary, in my opinion. Ted Green was big telly guy. Yeah, again, depending upon his era, Scott, the Telecaster and the Strat were the dominant guitars. So that wouldn't surprise me. The thing about mods is that when the time comes to sell said guitar, unless you save the original parts, everybody put bookmarks around that quote there. Save the original parts. How many times have I said it? I just got a set of free, nice, Fender pickups because somebody didn't want them because they were putting in Lollers. Again, save your parts. Um, and your guitar ends up of less value. No matter how much you spend upgrading. That is correct. So that gentleman, he put those lows in that guitar, but when he goes to sell it, it's still going to retail at whatever the secondhand market says it's going to retail at. The Lollers are not going to add any value to it, nor will anybody. I mean, everybody will say, "Sweet, I got a new Strat with Lollers in it," but I didn't pay more for them. So keep your parts. Keep your parts. I have a growing collection of parts, and that's okay because now if I'm missing a screw or if I'm putting something together, I can pretty much, well, 90% now say that I can find the part that I need around here. So save your parts for that reason too. Um, so yeah, I think we've all come to the general consensus that guitar modding has lost its soul to mass production. I think that that's one of the things that I'd like to point out. Now let's talk about money. In 2015, CTS pots were $3.50 each. 2015, CTS pots were $3.50 each, US dollars. Now they're $8 on up. Okay, now I remind you, CTS pots do come in different grades and qualities, but still, in all, that is quite a significant increase in cost. Switchcraft jacks used to be $4 in 2015. They're now $12 and up. Again, where it made sense before to do mods, because again, you want to keep your costs down. Unfortunately, that is proving to be not the deal that it used to be. Import VAT, shipping, and custom fees have made importing pickups or bridges a nightmare, not to mention, just the nightmare of the cost, of them. And believe me, I'm the king of trying to find the best quality and cheapest I can. I've had people bring over parts in suitcases from Japan. Hey, you're going to be in Tokyo. Could you stop by such and such? Or I'll have them send it to your hotel and could you bring it back for me? Just to try to keep the cost down because I would like to keep the quality, you know, pretty level. A simple pickup swap that used to cost 60 euros, for example, back in the 2015 period, now easily runs over $100 with VAT and shipping. If I want, for example, with Q pickups, I bought my set. Q Pickups is a boutique winery out of Croatia. They do beautiful work. Have the materials that they use is all top quality. There's no difference in the quality of the materials that Loller uses at twice the amount that Q Pickups does. That's why I went with them. I had the choice between going between Lola and Q pickups. I went with the Q pickups, and I bought a set of copies or duplicate or replicas, not replicas. I bought a set of Al Nickel 3 pickups that sound like they're voiced like a set of pickups that the Japanese made back in the day. um, the cost now for that same set of humbuckers is doubled. It's double, almost doubled. If you catch them on a sales day, it's almost double. But again, it's getting harder. It's getting harder to justify. I'm glad I got the stuff that I got. That's why I said get it when you can. If you see it, buy it. It's my best advice to you. If you got the cash, you just buy it and put it away. If you don't need it now because you don't know. I have multiple sets of Telecaster pickups and not a single Telecaster in the house. I have every part that you need hardware wise to build a Telecaster, but I have no Telecaster in sight. One of these days, one will come by and that I'll rebuild because, as you know, I'm still on the hunt for a Telecaster. Um, and that's just the way that it goes. So that's a good thing because I won't be chasing tomorrow's price, if you dig what I mean. I've locked today's price in on those. Tomorrow's price is not going to be cheaper. It's not going to be cheaper. So the skyrocketing cost of parts really make it harder to justify building a parts caster. And that's just the way it is. Let me catch up here in the chat. Mike says, my rule for pickup upgrades is only on guitars that I'm going to keep for a long term. If it's one you might sell or trade, leave it stock. I agree. Leave it stock. And even now, I was planning on keeping that Squire Affinity that I rebuilt for myself. I built one for my nephew Alex there, and I built one for myself. That one I was going to keep stock, but again, like I said, I got offered a set of Fender pickups, and I wasn't going to say no. Plus, Fern was going to put them in. That's brilliant. But I would have kept it stock, even though I was keeping it for myself. A, because I like the stock sound, and B, that's just something that's not worth doing. Again, that gets into now it's not worth it for me to reach out and get a set of pickups for it because the cost doesn't make sense. The best parts come from a box in the shed, not eBay. I agree, Scott. That's why you got to get that box going. I don't have a box. I've got cases. I got two Anvil cases, plus plus two cardboard boxes here on the floor behind me, plus little knickknack parts things, and I'm quite happy with that. Mike says, I had an Emerson wire kit on my Epi SG. It really improved the performance, in my opinion. Yeah, it's again for convenience and everything. I'm not saying this is not arguing from improvement of tone and all that. That's a separate issue. From the economic side, it used to be. I'm arguing that it used to be cheaper to do that, way cheaper, and also maybe for the money now that you're spending on the Emersons, it would cost you. You get something better, with that money back then, if you in terms of value. Yeah, nice. So there is that. It is convenient. It's damn convenient too. I've got them here. Like I said, I got pre-wired stuff like this sitting around all the time. And the thing is, I bought a bunch of these when they were cheap. Again, like I said, I can make any configuration that I want at this point as far as strats are concerned, and I also have a few telly plates as well. One for Baja style with a humbucker in the neck, and another plate with just a single like a broadcaster, just a single bridge pickup. Parts. They're just get them when you can. Lock in today's price. It's the best thing I can tell you because they're not going to get cheaper. When does modding still make sense? Well, let's not be all bleak about it. Modding still can be worth it if you have an emotional attachment to the guitar, if you're planning on keeping it for the long term, as Mike pointed out, if you're chasing a very specific sound or feature like I was with my Partscaster Strat. um, I wanted a three position switch because I don't like a five position switch, um, uh, with the tone being connected only to the bridge pickup, and just a volume and a tone knob moved away from the strings so that I'm not always knocking the volume. And I built exactly that HH configuration. Again, it made sense in that, and trying to keep it under a certain budget as well. If you're chasing into aesthetics, relics, custom guards, wild paint jobs, for example, um, you know, these are the time for guitars that are basically yours that you're planning on keeping for the long run. Has been has been pointed out here numerous times that any mod that you make to your guitar, you better make sure that you have the original parts, because it's not going to be of any value later on. With vintage guitars, when you make modifications to those, they go from being vintage guitars to being player's grade vintage guitars. And a player's grade vintage guitar is just not great. All the guitars that I import, 99% of the time, are 100% original. Again, for that 1% of them that aren't, I do the work in order to restore it to match everything else, just to make it look nice. But that's when modding makes sense in that case. But that's a different kind of modding, but it still falls under that. So in this case, these are the things that you can have in mind when you're making before you're making your modifications to your guitar to consider. If you have an emotional attachment to the guitar, if you're chasing a very specific sound or feature, if you're into the aesthetics of it, that's when you can think about it. And even then, consider a budget. Consider a budget. Look around for the best price. Mike, are you going to keep the Aria Telly? No, that Aria Telly has long moved on. I traded that on a deal because I took it down to Fern and had him tighten it up. We did a little bit of work on it, and it was, we assessed it, and I came to the conclusion that yeah, I liked it. It was a great guitar, but again, it wasn't for me. I didn't vibe with it, and neither did Firm. There was nothing wrong with it. There was no intonation problems. There was no wiring problems. There was nothing wrong with that guitar. But at the end of the day, we both kind of like, so it went. Again, I'm doomed. I'm doomed. I don't think I'm ever going to find one, just to be frank with you. Alex, I knew the squire you gave me was going to be amazing when I saw it had no back plate on it. You did great. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, it's a funny thing, Alex. Taking the back plate off really served two functions. First one was a myth, the kind of a myth that it improves the tone of your guitar. String tension in terms of the spring will do that more. So that's the second reason, so that you can, you'll see that some guys will have three springs on the back, some will have four, some will have five. That's just for the tension, the string tension. Um, but I think the third and most important reason that has nothing to do with any of that is just the fact that it looks cool. And it always has, and it always will. Guitar mods are like car mods. Most ruin the experience. Yeah, Yeah, after this refinish that I did on this Squire, that's it for me. Like I said, the next project is, well, if you can't find a telly that you like, why don't you build one that you like? Which is kind of where I think it's going. I think this is where it's all going. It's ironic because my Uncle Carlton has deeded me all of his guitars, and one of these days I'll have a vintage guitar collection. So really, I with knowing that in the back of my mind. By the way, then that's going to go to Alex. By the way, here because that's for sure. So Alex, you can look forward to that in a couple of decades when I've passed on. But we'll keep those in the family. But I'm groovy with what I got. I'm really groovy with what I got. Really am. Um, okay, so the future of DIY. So where does this leave DIY? Well, boutique modding is rising. Um, so it's not all doom. There are one-off artists who refinish our hot mod guitars. Uh, the infamous, Vela Bees guitars. I'll give that as a modern example of guys who, and then that got mass produced, you know. Pedals and home build gear are the new frontier. People are really getting more expressive with their pedals. When you look back in the day, can I take this off without messing this up? Yeah, I can do that. So when you look back at guitar pedals back in the day, this is from the early '80s, or early '90s, maybe late '80s, early '90s. They were really kind of just blah blah. They weren't that special. Now people are doing special colors. They're making them look really super fancy, and I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a new frontier for modding. Also, JHS Pedals is starting to release more and more DIY pedal kits. Uh, Build it yourself at home, save the money. We can sell you this kit of a pretty decent pedal. As long as you put it together, you're getting that quality price kind of thing built into it. That's a good thing. I think that's pretty creative. And those kits sell out like that. So that tells me that that's a good thing. So Josh is onto something over there. Um, in my case, modding is more like restoration. I keep the parts of things. I keep things also in case I have to do restoration work as it comes in as well with the guitars that I'm importing. It's not just flipping guitars. In my case, I actually have to work on them and get them because I buy them at a certain. They're all original, but they're the ones that the Japanese guys don't want because they want it as kid A or perfect as pretty beautiful as possible, as you know. And so I buy the non-kire ones and I make them palatable to a Western audience. So there's that. These are not upgrades. These are just restorations. Um, Now on YouTube, of course, people have a slight interest in seeing this kind of work being done, how it's done. Um, So there is a fire there. There is a future there, or a direction to go there. Um, that's possibly making modding evolve. Um, but I think there are certainly some issues or some aspects of it that economic issues are causing to fade out. I think that we're falling into a period where people are just going to say enough is enough, certainly in the cost of some of these boutique amps and pickups. I think spending $650, I think spending $1,000 for those Gibson pickups, I don't care if, Pamela Anderson delivers it here to the house. Personally, I'm not spending it that, well, No, I'm not spending $1,000 for a set of pickups. I don't care. So honestly speaking, not going to happen. And I think that for the average Joe out there, nobody's buying them either. So I think that soulless corporatism turned a lot of people off from modding as well. We were all joking and laughing at the pickups that came in the nice velvet case. But again, I think that was causing, to the detriment of the company, a little bit of angst out there amongst folks. They're like, "What the hell? $1,000 for a set of pickups? You're on your mind." You know, the cost of a Gibson Les Paul in 1959 in U.S. equivalent dollars is was $239, and which now is equivalent to about 2,900 or so, or 500 or so. We'll say 500 just to be for the sake of this discussion. And when you're talking about paying $1,000 now for a set of pickups, that's almost half the cost of the guitar. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. How would AI modify a guitar? Yeah, well, I'm waiting for the day where I was thinking about a similar train of thought actually there, Scott. What happens when Fender starts using AI to do come up with the newest, latest, the hottest creation in guitar design since, Leo Fender sat down with a pad and paper, an AI design guitar. The AI says that this guitar is, going to give you the best sound, the best playing experience. It's it. You watch, you see. If you buy a boutique build guitar, keep it for yourself like a modded guitar. You won't get the resale it probably deserves. Yeah, boutique builds as well. Thank you for bringing that up, Mike. That's a great point. Boutique building guitars. These guys have the Fender Custom Shop. We've mentioned that tonight. Gibson Custom Shop build them things. And then when they go on to resell them for various reasons, they're not getting half of what they paid for them. I've seen Les Pauls that guys got built for them at the custom shop for 9 grand, 10 grand, or more that were going for 5 or 6 thousand when they went to resell them. So yeah, good point there. Always good points with my crew here. I don't really see restoration and or relics as mods. Well, yeah, I understand. If we're looking at the strict definition, I agree. Ben says, not unless Pamela is offering happy endings with that delivery. Well, she's dating Liam Nielsen now, so I wouldn't want him showing up. No, 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 no. A grant, a grant is set with a custom box. Another scam. Yeah, the greedy comes. Yeah, the soulless corporations. The soulless corporations, and that's kind of where I'm going with this discussion tonight. It's just making that point is that anything that starts off organically, believe me, a corporation will come along and just crush the soul out of that. Just flat out crush the soul out of it. And the mod, realm is kind of like that now, where they kind of expect you to do it. Where, let's play a game. So when Gibson is selling you a set of burst bunkers for $1,000, this is going, I could state, unequivocally from a mindset on their part that you're going to be changing out the pickups in the guitar that you bought from them, which then means that could it be said that they're not really doing the best with the existing pickups that you bought from the original, the original pickups? Again, it starts getting to questions. So, in that exercise, that mental exercise itself, the corporation has done nothing really to help themselves. They're basically saying to the consumer, "Well, we're going to sell you an expensive guitar with shitty pickups, but don't worry, for $1,000 you can replace those. And you've already spent $3,000 on the guitar." You know, again, when they got involved, it muddied the waters. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Has Gibson's M2M sales gone down since the Mod Garage has been going? Um, I think the Fender one has because one of the guys that everybody wanted to have build a guitar retired. So I know the Fender one has, but the Gibson I can't say. Nuclear Blue. Let me be clear, folks. Welcome, Nuclear Blue. Mike says they have MTM in the garage from the vids I've seen with slices of great tops for a ton of bread. Well, yeah, that's it. And that also leads me to ask the question, are they really saving the good stuff that be pre-shop that would have gone on to the standards? So again, this tiering of pricing on guitars in this way is diabolical because it leads to me a lot of questions that make me want to say, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with it, because, you know, what are you doing here, really? Mr. Watson, the $1,000 pickups may not sound as good as the originals too. Again, a screwdriver, a good amp, and a set of ears will help you find the best sweet spot for your pickups before you even think about modding them anyway. Kisses from Nuclear Blue. Well, thank you very much. I'll take those, I guess. you just dig all that, guys. Just take that under consideration, is all I ask. Because, again, sometimes you don't have the best modification is to do nothing. It's just one of those things. I think the kisses were sincere there, or unless Nuclear Blue is retracting the kisses now. Questions? All right, guys. So, modding isn't dead, but it's certainly changing, and rising cost and ready to play models have definitely changed the game. And as long, however, as there's creative artists out there that want to express themselves visually, then it'll still live. It'll still go on. Let me scroll ahead here, guys. This is one thing that I didn't have ready for tonight. So I have to go to page 200 of this book. And I am only on page 53. I will look at you while I scroll so that I don't kill the vibe of the product. 116. Oh, I'm almost there. Getting there. Where are we at now? Okay, here we go. Page 200. All right. Closed out. We're going to get into the Dave McGowan book, Weird Seasons Inside the Canyon, a little bit today. A little bit. Teensy weensy, little itty bitty bit. As you guys know, in Japan, where it's very hot right now, in the summertime, a summer tradition is to have ghost stories and scary movies in the theaters. And the idea is that a fright will give you goose pimples and cool you down. And I lived in Japan for 18 years, and every summer, you would tell ghost stories, spooky stories, or strange, weird things would show up on Japanese TV, haunted this, that, or the other. And I thought that I would continue that tradition here in Amsterdam, bring it here, and read some excerpts from a book by Dave McGowan called "Where Scenes Inside the Canyon" to talk about the spooky background of the Los Angeles music scene. You guys would excuse my thick tongueness tonight. As you remember, I had my wisdom teeth taken out. It's healed up, but it's still a little weird. Still a little thick tongued. So we're going to touch upon that tonight. We're going to tie it into a couple of things. Speaking of Frank Zappa, by the way, because of course, Frank Zappa was the king of the Laurel Canyon scene. Without any question, he was the reigning king. If you went up there and you were worth any salt, and it doesn't matter who you went through Zappa. That included the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, of course, the Doors, Jimi Hendrix. Everybody went through Zappa. That's just a fact. Let me catch up here in the chat. Mike says, I got a bit of major sticker shock when I checked out those small builder amps. You know, you would think, hey, a guy's doing himself. He doesn't have the overhead, he's doing this, so it couldn't be too ridiculous. No, no, you know, no. As you know, I'm looking for another small combo amp. I'd like to get a 10-inch or something smaller for recording. But the prices on those things, the ones of any quality, it's got to have effects loop on it. Love for it to have some kind of reverb tank on it. It can be digital or real. Not really particular about that, but the prices even on those are outrageous. I spent a day in a jewelry store. No price tag shocks me anymore. I hear you, man. Yeah, diamond market's falling though. Hey, it says, "Be happy. We are here, sir, and we're happy to have you here. Thank you so much for showing up." But aside from Zappa being the king of the Laurel Canyon scene, there was another guy who I guess could say was the court jester. And if you know anything about the history of what the purpose of a court jester was in a court, they really were the magician. Actually, it's you think that those two roles were different, but actually, in reality, the court jester was the magician, the magician, the you know the guy that usually you would think otherwise. But the painted face, think Joker from Batman, clowns, all that, court jesters, usually the smart guys. So the guy who, if Zappa was the king, the court jester would be Papa John Phillips. Now, a lot of bad stuff in here about Papa John Phillips. I don't want to read it because YouTube doesn't like talking about this kind of stuff. But he was born in 1935. My mother was born in 1935. My mother's still around. John Phillips is not. But much like all the other Laurel Canyon people that we've discussed before, lo and behold, he was born to parents Claude and Edna Phillips. That's very interesting. My mother's name was Edna. Born same year, mother named Edna. That's funny. My mom and him have a lot in common. Claude John Andrew Phillips, the father, was a retired Marine Corps officer and engineer. His father, John Andrew Phillips, was a prominent and influential architect. And his mother, Edna, was a psychic and faith healer. So, that at 1 year old was purportedly kidnapped by gypsies. So he had a very interesting background, of course, the military uh, being in his background as well. And I bring up John Phillips tonight because um, I want to move forward to now. Um, I was watching. Okay, I'm going ahead, getting ahead of my. I think you guys know where I'm going with this. Um, John Phillips and the Mama and the Papas were a seminal band during this time period. Their songs, the mood of their songs, and I'll admit to you, I was listening to all the leaves are brown in the sky, California Dreaming. I don't care what anybody says, the vibe of that song is haunting. It's one of the most haunting songs ever recorded, in my opinion. And that was the Mamas and the Papas with John Phillips. Now, John Phillips was a bad guy. He did a lot of bad stuff, and he did a lot of bad things to the people around him. And his granddaughter married that actor, Danny Matheson, from that '70s show. And we all know that Danny Matheson now is doing a 30 to life stretch for another subject that I don't care to mention here on YouTube, but I think you guys know. So, bad things, of course, the death of the people that were involved in that group. Cass, Mama Cass, her death, much like the death, I think, of Janis Joplin, is just, weird stuff going on. There was a lot of things going on here. And one of the things that I'll fast forward to about John, should have really set this up beforehand, is the fact that um, it said that a lot of the houses that he owned were wired. They were wired for sound and for recording, which is as primitive as it was during that time. That stuff was entirely possible. And you say to yourself, well, gee, Mike, that sure does sound familiar. Who else do we know recently uh, basically got gassed up for wiring and recording stuff in their house? Um, where do you think this stuff comes from? There, as I said, there's a genesis, of course, for the boutique guitar builders. There's a genesis for the really nefarious things that occurred in the '60s, that led up to the things that you see today. It's learned behavior. It's learned behavior. Hey, it worked for, allegedly, I'm not even saying allegedly, at this point it's pretty much well confirmed. It worked for John Phillips, you know. Let's move that forward. And God knows how many people were involved in that, or how many stars or recording artists and things were involved in this kind of thing for the last half a century. And I'm just talking about a half a century. I'm sure I could go a lot earlier than that. I'm sure that probably, in like Caruso's house back in 1926, there was a guy behind the curtain going like this every time he had a party. um, John Phillips, by the way, was heavily invested with that J. Sebring's business. J. Sebring, I know you guys won't remember a lot of names we've been throwing out over the last few weeks with this. He's one of the guys that got offed by Manson and his people. So there's a connection there. Um, Michelle Phillips, also in the group, had a brief affair with Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski got chased out because he was involved again in stuff that, these guys are involved in so much dirt that I can't even mention the things that they say that they did. I can't say the things that they did on YouTube. Okay? I think if any of you guys know your history, you know what what Roman Polanski did. You being a great, Ninth Gate's one of my favorite movies. You know, but still, you know, he. So Mama Michelle Phillips had an affair with him. While he was married to Sharon Tate, who was soon to be murdered by one of John Phillips' business partner, along with one of John Phillips' business partners, J.C. Brings. You see the connections here? Mama Cass lived just across the road. And by the way, Tate was initiated by these people into witchcraft. There was witchcraft occurring up there as well. Because witchcraft in the 60s in LA was really big. You had guys, you had the Church of Satan that was really starting to rise up. Sammy Davis Jr. was a big number one member of the Church of Satan, Mr. Candyman. He was only giving out red hots. A lot of these Hollywood people were involved in that Church of Satan. Jane Mansfield, Church of Satan. Obviously, up here with Sharon Tate. I'm just saying, guys. If that's the safest thing that I can mention, then all the rest of the stuff that I'm not saying is really bad. It's really bad. So learn behavior, guys. Learn behavior. I can go on. Yeah, I mean I can go on, but I've made my point that this modern stuff. I guess it's a refrain of mine that what is old is new, and what's new is old. In other words, there's nothing new under the sun. And the stuff that you see today and hear reports on, not on Entertainment Tonight anymore because they're gone. But the reports that you hear on things that go on is nothing new. It's been going on in the entertainment business for a long time. And so you really shouldn't be surprised. It should not be a shock to anybody when I tell you that this filming stuff and this witchcraft stuff and this really, really, really questionable, death stuff, like Whitney Houston, never mind. It has been going on for a long time. And it's just, spinning, moving right along. Yeah, like the 57 tweet champ reissues. Yeah, man, get your wallet out indeed. I agree, Ben. I agree, California Dreaming is haunting, and so is The Sounds of Silence. Yeah, that's another one. My parents had that album that was on, and Scarborough Fair. Those are three haunting ass songs, Really. So the mood of it, the sound of it, the key that it's written in, everything about those three songs that were just mentioned there. Listen to all three of those in one sitting, and maybe maybe you would just be too depressed to get out of bed. Eddie Hazel, best ever cover, California Dreamin' on his solo record. It was games, dames, and guitar things. Yep. I know that album. Drake, my old friend Drake used to play that album back in the day. Best version there. Hit that link, guys, up. What is this live about? Well, in another few moments, this live is going to be about nothing because we're almost getting to the end here. But basically, we talk about guitar gear and music industry related things. Tonight, I'm reading to give you guys the chills, to create a little bit of a scare, to cool you down if you're in hot temperatures right now, about the scary stuff that happened in the 60s in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles in the early music scene, LA music scene, and how it's no different from what's going on in the music scene today. Same learned behavior, same bad behavior, same really wickedness is still going on. No more Mary Hart. Mary Hart. I'm not sure what you mean with Mary Hart. I'm sorry, I don't know that one, Scott. Um, I'd like to know that. Mary Hart? Why is that ringing a bell? Well, it's past midnight, and like most pumpkins, I have turned. I want to thank you guys so much for always showing up to these live streams and listening to this stuff. Getting a bit of music history here at the end as well. Talking about mods and the future of such and whether or not you're interested in that. Just a lot of stuff, guys. Entertainment Tonight, Mary. That's why. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's why that name rings a bell. Holy moly. Is that a fact? New tune, California Scheming. No, that's an old tune as well. Because believe me, John Phillips was scheming back then in the 60s. Just a fact. You guys take care. I hope you have a fantastic week. I hope that we're just as chipper and cheery as we are Sunday night. And when we get to the Wednesday, God willing, night hump, I will see you guys then. Take care, guys. Bye bye.